Hey everybody, my name is Phil. Earlier this year I decided to start reading the Bible from front to end. I wanted to just kind of capture on video a little bit of a journal to share with you all what I'm reading and what I'm learning. Ultimately for me, I just wanted to learn more about the character of God and see what lessons He might have that I can live out in my life today. So I hope these videos are beneficial to you in some way, and I hope you enjoy them. Welcome back. We are in 2 Kings chapter 9. This tells the story of a man named Jehu. So if you remember the kingdom of Israel, it's in turmoil. The wicked legacy of King Ahab is still looming over the land. Queen Jezebel is still remaining unrepentant. And behind the scenes, God is preparing to bring a long-awaited judgment, and He's chosen an unlikely man to carry it out. A man named Jehu, or Jehu, as I like to call him. Jehu is a battle-hardened commander in Israel's army. So at the beginning of chapter 9, Prophet Elisha, he calls in a young servant. He gives him a strange but urgent task. In verse 1, he says, "Take this flask of oil with you. Go to Ramoth Gilead and find Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi. Call him into a private room away from his friends and pour the oil over his head. Say to him, 'This is what the Lord says. I anoint you to be the next king over Israel.' After you tell him this, get out of there. Run away." So he tells him to deliver this message and then run. So the young man, he obeys. He travels to this army base. He finds Jehu sitting around with his buddies, other officers and commanders of the army. With nervous energy, he pulls Jehu aside into this private room, and he does exactly what Elisha asked him to do. He pours this flask of oil over his head, and he says, "Hey, the Lord says that you're going to be the next king over the people of Israel. You're going to strike down this house of Ahab, and you're going to avenge the blood of the prophets and God's servants that were killed by Jezebel." So after he delivers this message, he takes off, he runs out of there. So Jehu, he steps back into the company of his commanders, his fellow commanders, his buddies, and the oil's still bright on his head. It's still glistening. The men are probably looking at him like, are you entering a bodybuilding competition? Why are you so sweaty? But no, the men are puzzled and curious, and they say, "There's that little man that just ran out of here. What did he say to you?" So finally Jehu tells him, "Apparently the Lord has anointed me to be the next king over Israel." So immediately the atmosphere shifts. The men, they spring to their feet, they lay their cloaks down on the steps in front of Jehu, they're blowing trumpets, and they shout, "Jehu is king." So Jehu, he wastes no time. He orders, "Let's keep this on the down low." But then he races off towards Jezreel, the city. He races off in his chariots, where King Joram, which is Ahab's son, and King Ahaziah, who's the king of Judah, are both chilling. So when he's approaching the city, there's a watchman at the tower. He sees Jehu's chariot coming, and he reports it to the king. The king says, "Let's send out a messenger and meet that rider and ask him, who he is." So in verse 19, the messenger comes to Jehu and he says, "The king wants to know if you come in peace." Jehu responds, "What do you know about peace? Get behind me. Join the party. Let's go." So the messenger joins him. They continue their approach to the city. So King Joram sends a second messenger, same thing. He falls in behind him, and they're continuing their charge towards the city. So the watchman at the tower, he notices that the messengers have been there, they've delivered their message, but they're not returning. The watchman says, "I think that might be Jehu, the son of Nimshi, because he's driving like a madman." So apparently Jehu had the reputation of being a terrible driver. We all know someone like that. I'm not going to mention anybody's name for my own safety, but you know that I know that you know that we know. Okay, I'm done. So King Joram and King Ahaziah, they decide, let's go out and meet this fella. So they go out, they mount their chariots, they ride to confront Jehu. Guess where they meet? They meet on the fateful field, the very field of the vineyard of Naboth. Now you guys remember Naboth. He was that fellow that Ahab and Jezebel had arranged basically to have murdered so that Ahab could have his vineyard. And back in 1 Kings, Elijah had told Ahab and Jezebel, because of this evil that you have done, you are going to meet the same fateful end as Naboth. So in verse 22, King Joram and King Ahaziah have come out to meet Jehu, and they say, "Do you come in peace, Jehu?" Jehu responds, "How can there be peace as long as the idolatry and the witchcraft of your mom Jezebel are all around us?" So Joram, he's starting to get a sense for like, oh, I don't think I'm in a safe spot here. I better get going. So he U-turns his chariot. He tries to flee. He's shouting to King Ahaziah, "Get out of here! It's treason!" But it was too late. Jehu drew his bow and shot him straight into the back. The arrow pierced his heart, and he collapsed in his chariot. Jehu told his officers to throw Joram's body into Naboth's field. King Ahaziah, he tries to escape too, but he was hunted down and he was mortally wounded. He ended up fleeing, but he ended up dying a short time after. Now, starting in verse 30, we're back in Jezreel. The notorious Queen Jezebel has heard of Jehu's arrival, but instead of hiding in fear, she does her makeup, she fixes up her hair, and she sits in the window, ever proud, ever manipulative. As Jehu enters the city gate, she calls down mockingly. In verse 31, she says, "Have you come in peace, you murderer? You're just like Zimri, who murdered his master." So Jehu, he looks up at the window where she's sitting. He notices a few others standing there beside her, with her. He just says simply, "Who is on my side? Who?" So 2 or 3 eunuchs look down at him and they kind of give him that old, "I'm on your side," kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod type situation. So he says, "Throw her down." So they do. They throw her down. Her body hits the wall, the ground, blood splatters everywhere. Jehu, he drives his chariot right over her body. Towards the end of the chapter, Jehu orders her body to be buried, but when the servants go to collect her remains, they found only her skull, feet, and hands. The wild dogs had eaten the rest. And this was a fulfillment of the prophecy from 1 Kings that we were talking about. So 2 Kings chapter 9, it's dramatic, it's intense. It tells us the story of Jehu being anointed as the king of Israel. It tells the story of his swift execution of God's judgment against Ahab's house, in particular Jezebel. And on the surface, it seems to be a tale of bloodshed and political upheaval, but underneath lies a very important truth, that God's justice won't be mocked, and his purposes always prevail in his time. I think we see that God appoints his leaders. Elisha, he sends this young prophet to go anoint Jehu as the king, and Jehu never had the ambition of being a king, but he was called to it by God. Jehu wasn't chosen for comfort, but to carry out a very specific mission. He was a battle-hardened commander, and God used him to do what needed to be done. And I think likewise, God calls us, it's not always to be easy. He's just asking us to be obedient and courageous. He doesn't always call the most qualified people, but he does qualify the people that he calls. The other thing I think I saw here was that God always keeps his promises. So God had long ago spoken about judgment on Ahab's house for the idolatry and the murder of the prophets of God, and now, through Jehu, that judgment comes to pass. So God's judgment was delayed, but it was never denied. And I think for us, when we see evil things going on around us, or we see evil prospering in the world, we have to remember that God sees all, and he will act. And last but not least, I think God shows us that he punishes the proud. Jezebel, she's sitting here, she's proud to her very terrible, fateful end, just as Elijah had prophesied. Jezebel represents the rebellion, the manipulation, the idolatry, and the evil that was going on in Israel at this point in time, and God brings her down. I think we have to remember that pride goes before destruction. And we have to ask ourselves, are there areas in my life where I've hardened my heart to God's voice? I think overall this chapter reminds us that God is not indifferent when it comes to sin. He raises up leaders for his specific purposes, and his justice will always prevail. Jehu's story might seem harsh, but it teaches us that God is holy, he's patient, but he's also just. So the challenge I have for me and for you is that when God calls us to do something, we need to respond in humble obedience. We need to fear the Lord, and we need to have a heart that's ready to be used. Not for some personal glory of our own, but to help carry out God's mission throughout the world. That's what I got. Won't he do it?